Okay, hi everybody. I am so glad to be with you. I apologize for the little technical difficulties there. But as I was introduced, my name is Kerry Wong. I am a writer and patient advocate living with a rare disease called sarcoidosis. Today, one of the most important things that anyone in this room or outside of this room, watching on Zoom, anywhere, what I want you all to know, first and foremost, is your voice matters, your story matters, you matter, and you are not alone. I think it's really hard sometimes for that to sink in when we are sick and everyone around us is not, especially with a rare disease that no one around us understands. And it's easy for us to kind of like shrink inside ourselves. But I really want to make sure that every one of you knows, you sitting in this room, you watching this video live or later, every one of you matters. So the main things really to kind of take away from this later on is, again, first and foremost, and I can say it as many times as it takes to really sink in, is that your story matters and you can make a difference with using your story, with telling your story. And we'll talk about some tips for making an impact with your story. So I'll start off a little bit about me. And I kind of feel like my story, my life is sort of split in two, where it's kind of split between before I got sick and after I got sick. So before I got sick, I, was just like some of you. I was in school. I, graduated, got a master's degree, had a good career going. I actually went through a couple of different jobs, but primarily I was a teacher and worked at a couple other nonprofit organizations. And along the way, I was also volunteering at things like Special Olympics since I was a child, at blood drives, at special events, all kinds of things, really doing as much as I possibly could to make an impact in the community. And then when I got sick, or I should say, as I was getting sicker and sicker, that all kind of stopped. I wasn't able to do any of that anymore. And so I had to kind of find a way to shift my perspective and find a way to not feel like I was nothing because I wasn't everything I was before. And it's taken some time, but over the last 10 to 15 years, I have kind of developed a sort of new way of getting through all of this, a new way of still finding purpose, still finding meaning, still doing what I could to make a difference in the world. And so currently I have a column I write twice a month for Sarcoidosis News. I am the state advocacy chair with the Arthritis Foundation here in New York. As was mentioned, I co-host and help co-organize a really awesome rare disease awareness campaign that comes in August. I totally encourage all of you to look into it. It's called Dazzle for Rare. It's really easy, but it's really awesome. And it's just a matter of everyone with all different rare diseases lifting each other's voices so that we can reach a greater audience. I also occasionally co-host that AI Arthritis podcast. And most recently, what I am most proud of is that I have just created a book called Kaleidoscope Rare Disease Stories. Now, Kaleidoscope, this book, it is completely, all net proceeds are donated to NORD. And what it is it's a combination of, I've written some of the stories myself, but I've got 46 other writers in there. And it is everybody with all different stories, all different diseases, all different conditions, sharing some aspect of their story in order to make an impact, in order to make a difference, in order to help other people who are reading it to understand something a little bit more about us and what we go through. And, you can see on here, there was a big range of ages represented, a big range of conditions represented, different countries represented. And so this really is, it's been my passion project for the past year. To make it even more symbolic, I launched the project on Rare Disease Day last year, and it was just released on Thursday, so that it was Rare Disease Day. We came out with this book. I am going to be sending over a couple of copies for your program, and hope, if anybody is not able to, purchase their own copy, you can, share that, check it out whenever you are interested. And I hope that you will be. And because this has become so meaningful and so moving and so powerful for myself, as well as, some other people who have been a part of the story, a part of the book, and also others who are just starting to read it. So I've kind of made that into, it's going to be a series. So I will have, additional books coming out with stories from people with invisible illness, with disability, with undiagnosed and misdiagnosed stories, how mental health can be affected with all of these things. And I think that probably everybody in this room has some overlap with some of those other groupings. And it's something that I think we can all relate to and we can all connect. And that's one of the biggest things that has come out of, I think, my purpose and what's been received with this book, is that even when we have different diagnoses, so much of our experience is shared, is common. And it's only been out a couple days. The writers have had the book for maybe a week, and I've had so many people tell me that after reading certain stories in here, they don't feel alone. They feel seen. And, I will admit it, I do too. I read these stories and I cry, and I, hurt my neck from nodding in agreement so much. And that's really the power that your stories have. So, we've gone through a little bit of my sort of professional story, but I want to give you a little bit about what has been said to me about my condition. So for the first 4 years, basically all I was told over and over and over again by doctors, by people that friends, family, coworkers, was, you don't look sick. And I think a lot of us have experienced that, that idea of, if people don't see what's wrong, again, it's that idea of looking for zebras. We look like horses and everything looks fine. And so it's really easy for us to be dismissed. Beyond that, once I had some more visible symptoms and, continued going to the doctor saying, look, you can't tell me I made this up, I still wasn't really able to get a concrete answer for a while. I was told I had some kind of arthritis. I was told it was probably autoimmune. It might be this, it could be that, but nobody really knew what it was. And even once I was officially diagnosed in 2015, accurately, I still got a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. And the responses that I got, it's like, what, something else I'm sure some of you have heard in the room, at least it's not cancer. And that's one of the things that can be so hurtful.
It's Rare Disease Day.
As much as
Rare Disease Day this evening.
I think we all know that just feels kind of dismissive of who we are and what we're going through. I had one doctor who just looked at me and said, I am puzzled by you. And then he just stopped. Like, he didn't go on to say, and I'm going to help you figure out this puzzle. It was just kind of left up in the air. And, I think a lot of us get, we go to a doctor and they say, okay, it's not this bad condition. But then they leave it's the end of the conversation for them. And we are still left wondering and suffering and stressing over trying to figure out what it is that's going on. One of the other things that I was told very, very often, that just infuriates me so much, and I think a lot of people, I know so many people have been told the same, is doctors say, oh, well, you just need to lose weight. You lose weight, you'll feel better. That's all there is to it. And, the reason that just really gets me so much is this was me before I got sick. I was thin. I was healthy. I was, that was actually me getting ready to go to a 5K that I ran some, walked some. And this is how I was before then. And then as soon as I got sick and once they finally agreed that I was sick, even though they didn't know what it was, they put me on steroids. And this is how I am after steroids. And this is when they tell me I need to lose weight. And that's wonderful. But obviously, weight is not what caused my problems. And I think that's something that is just so frustrating. And I wanted to share a few excerpts from the book because, again, hearing other people's stories and reading other people's stories and sharing your own story, I think that is really just so powerful. We get so much out of it from both sides. From being the one to share our stories, it can be cathartic. It can be just validating, when you get a better reaction from someone else who is living with a rare disease, from someone else who understands. And, when we're reading other people's stories, a lot of times we can finally realize, hey, I'm not the only one that happens to. Hey, this isn't just me. So here's one of the excerpts I wanted to share with you. It's incredible how close you can get with people you've never seen in person, some of whom you've never even seen a picture. In the arthritis and sarcoidosis groups, we share our questions, our frustrations, our hopes, and our fears. In the real world, it can take months or years of developing a relationship before we allow ourselves to be so vulnerable and around somebody. But in these groups, it happens instantly. Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm really scared. Hi, I'm so and so, and I just sit on my bed and cry for what feels like hours. I can't believe I'm never going to do my favorite activity again. Hi, I'm so and so, and you wouldn't believe what my doctor said. I am so effing mad, I could scream. Hi, I'm so and so, and I've developed this new symptom. Have any of you ever experienced this? Hi, I'm so and so, and I just feel like no one understands what I'm going through. In these groups, we can say anything and we know that we won't be judged. We can ask anything and we know that someone will respond. In these groups, they understand. They know what we're going through because they've been through it too. In these groups, there is empathy, there is genuine care and compassion, there is acceptance, which is not always easy to come by on the outside. So that's just one excerpt from one of the stories that I shared. And I think sharing your story and making the most out of it and putting the most into it to really get the greatest impact. It's easiest if we think about this in terms of 5 Ws and an H. I remember sort of learning that idea decades ago, probably before you all were born. So that's going to make me feel old right now. But it's this idea of when you're sharing a story, when you're telling a story, when you're gathering information, these are the things that we want to know. We want to know who, we want to know what, when, where, why, and how. And all of these things really come into sharing your story and making an impact as well. So first off, we want to know who should tell your story. And obviously, I'm here to tell you, every single one of you should be sharing your story. And one of the reasons we want to be the ones to share our story is because if we don't, someone else is making up a story about us based on what they don't understand. And so that's why it's not only that we need to tell these stories, but they need to be heard. Patients and caregivers need to hear stories so that they know they're not alone. So we all know. Friends and family need to hear these stories so that they understand what's going on with us. Coworkers and employers need to know what's our stories so that we might need accommodations. We might just need a little understanding when we have to, perhaps, and this would include classmates, teachers, if you need an extension on a paper because your condition is just, is getting in the way. You have, treatments or symptoms or flares that are just making it tough for you right now. The only way they're going to understand is if we tell them. Healthcare providers especially need to know what's going on. We can't leave things out for them. And then what can be most powerful is lawmakers and bureaucrats. That's the way we get legislative change and access to care and funding for research and things like that. It's only if we tell them, we show them who we are and what we need. So the next question really comes down to, what's your story? And the reality is we have a lot of stories. I mean, every single one of us has built up a lifetime of stories, of experiences, of things that have happened to us. And so what I think is really most powerful, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so our job in telling our stories and picking which story to tell is really to pick a story, pick a moment, pick an experience that makes you feel and shows how you feel, and tell it so that we can get whoever it is we're telling them to feel it. Because when they feel it, they're going to want to treat us differently, do something that we're asking them for. They're going to get it if we make them feel. So here's another excerpt from another story. No more excuses, no more denying what was happening. Myasthenia gravis can affect any voluntary muscle. For me, this meant blurry vision, difficulty swallowing, trouble breathing, inability to walk for more than a few feet, and even not being able to dry my hair. Daily, long, luxurious hot showers became too arduous and were reduced to weekly, lukewarm dread. My crazy, curly, out of control hair could no longer be straightened to the style I preferred. Walk into my car felt as if I had run a marathon, and I was terrified to drive. My vision became so blurry that reading became nearly impossible. Work stopped. My ability to socialize as I used to was quelled. I was scared. I was isolated, and I was so alone. I didn't know anyone else with this strange disease. I had taken up residence in Pity City. And so, as Kathy shares that, I think we are able to feel the loneliness, the fear, the isolation, the everything that she was going through. We don't just hear that she was going through it. The way that she tells her story, we really do feel it. And so, of course, the next W comes to when. And there are so many times that it is important and helpful, and we have the opportunity to share those stories. When we meet a new doctor, we need to be able to share our story of what it is that we're experiencing, the symptoms, the even how we feel about those symptoms, which parts are most important for us. You know, when it comes, I remember a while back I had learned about, there's sort of different ways that we as patients approach a medical appointment and our results or our consideration of success or failure in, say, a treatment, for instance. Um, Doctors, for the most part, as many of you I'm sure have experienced, are looking to see that our numbers are better. Whatever lab results that they're taking, whatever scans that they're doing, what they consider success is if the numbers go in a better direction, if the scans show progress or at least don't show things getting worse. That's what doctors consider success. But for us, it's different. You know, what we might be looking forward to is, I want to be able to go down the block. I want to be able to hold my little brother. I want to be able to play baseball with my friends. I want to be able to work. I want to be able to stay in school full time. Whatever those things are, you know, that's what's important to us. And if the doctors don't recognize that, then what they're going to do everything to take us in a different direction. And we need to make sure that we tell them our stories, and that includes what's important to us, so that we can make sure they're steering the course of treatment in the direction that we want it to be. When you meet a new zebra, that is a great time, a great opportunity to share your story. Because when we share our stories, that's when we are able to connect. When you want something, when you need something, whether that's an accommodation from a teacher, a new accessible, a mobility aid, for instance, um, anything that it is that you want, that you need, some help, some assistance, some extra time. If we just, a lot of times, if we just say, I want this or I need this, people aren't really going to respond very well. But if we share a little bit of our story about why it is that we want this, why it is that we need that, we're much more likely to get the understanding, the consideration, and more likely to get whatever it is that we're asking for. When can you share your story? When somebody asks. And that's a little bit more iffy, I would say. There are times when somebody asks because they care and they genuinely understand what they want to understand, what it is that we're going through. And that can be a great time to share whatever part of your story you are comfortable with. That's really one of the things that's most important, is what you are comfortable with makes a big difference. You don't need to get into a whole lot more than you want to share. This is your story. This is your life. This is your business. And sometimes there are people who think that they're entitled to hear what we have to say, because especially if our illness is not invisible, if there's something they can see, if we're using a mobility aid, if we have some visible representation of our symptoms, sometimes people, and it could be a stranger on the street, or just, somebody online next to you, when you're going to get a coffee, sometimes people will just automatically take it upon themselves and say, oh, what happened to you? And I mean, that can really, really be frustrating, and hurtful, because there's something in the tone. And so that would be a time I'm going to say you do not have to tell your story at all. It is nobody's business but yours to share with who you feel needs to know or deserves to know, when you feel they deserve to know it, and how much you feel they deserve to know and you are comfortable telling. But when somebody asks out of genuine care and concern, it's a really good time to share a little bit more. And, that kind of leads to whenever you want is when you can share your story. And so, of course, there's a question of where. And there are so many different places that you can share your story. And, it starts with right there in the room that you're in, talking to each other. But we can, do things on social media, blogs, podcasts, email. I started with a blog back in 2010. At that point, I had a lot of symptoms. Nobody knew what they were, or nobody knew what was causing them. And I was really frustrated and stressed. And I was going to a center for alternative therapy, and, some chiropractic adjustments and massage therapy and that kind of thing. And I was talking with a couple of other people and, sharing a little bit of my story. They were sharing a little bit of theirs. And one of the, I was trying to kind of offer some support for what they were going through. And one of the other patients looked at me and she said, Kerry, you have such a strong survivor spirit. You have gone through so much, but, you always just come out with another story to tell. And I think that was kind of the light bulb aha moment for me, was that having these other stories to tell could actually be helpful. And so I started a blog, and I figured nobody is going to know about it. Nobody is going to care, but I'm going to do it myself. And I was able to kind of write out some things of just whatever I was experiencing, what was frustrating me, what was bothering me, thinking that there's got to be somebody else out there who's got a similar experience. And so then I would kind of take my story and I would share it, but I would want to leave some sort of resolution at the end, that if somebody else was going through it, I wanted them to feel better. So I wanted to come up with a way to end with hope. And because I was ending with hope for whoever might be reading, I ended up kind of giving myself some hope too. And so what started as a blog later on turned into a column, which then kind of progressed to the book that, that came out just a couple days ago. And, so that's something that can do so much for you, to be able to get things off your chest, to be able to sort of work out finding some resolution for yourself. When I was an English teacher, especially teaching composition classes, one of the things I did very often was I would give my students free writing exercises. So it was basically just, we'd come into class and, take out a pen, take out a paper. Yes, this was back before everyone had a laptop in class. But take out a pen, take out a paper, just put your pen to paper and start writing. It doesn't matter what you're writing about, just free writing. Wherever your head goes, let your pen follow. And a lot of times through that, people would begin to kind of develop ideas and, write about things they didn't even realize were on their mind. And that would kind of lead to some progression or some more substantial story, more substantial situation that they could kind of write themselves into and write themselves out of. And so that's something that can be really helpful. And of course, there are more professional ways that you can, and places that you can share your story. For instance, at a rare disease day event, you can share your story in a book, in a letter to the editor, advocacy appointments, that kind of thing. And so that can be really, really helpful. Next, we come up to why. And this is really, some of this is what I've kind of been sharing up to now is, some of the things that you can get out of it are the reasons why. And so, for instance, there is advocacy, which is basically standing up for yourself and saying what you need, which can be as simple as advocacy for a new treatment in your doctor's office. And I take that back. It's not necessarily simple, but that's important. And that is standing up for yourself. But it could be as much as going to Washington, D.C. and meeting with your senators and your congressmen and saying, this is my situation. This is legislation that could help me. And I need your support. And, I've been doing that for several years, and doing that is empowering. It is such a positive experience. I highly recommend it, because you also get connected with other advocates. And you see, just like Nord says, alone we are rare, together we are strong. And when Nord does, the Rare Action Network, if any of you are a part of it, it is getting together rare disease patients and caregivers and bringing us together to advocate for legislative issues that will make a difference for people like us. And that's really powerful, and that's really important. You may want to share your story for catharsis. It could just make you feel better to get it out there. Sometimes it's to comfort yourself. Sometimes it's to get comforted because you're stressed and you're upset. And if you tell somebody what's going on, they might be able to help you feel better. There is connection. As we've talked about, sharing your story and hearing somebody else say, oh, I know what that's like. I had that same experience. There's this bond that gets created among us that, just can be so much stronger than anybody else you might meet in another way, in another form. You might want to share your story to help educate other people about your rare disease, or about rare diseases in general, or about the need for treatment, or whatever situation it is. As I said, it is empowering. And that's one of the things that, when I got sick, I kind of felt like everything I was losing. And it was only through getting started in advocacy and sharing my story and issues like that I began to realize, okay, wait a minute, I may not be able to do that anymore, but I can still do this. And this is still, I still have strength. I still matter. I still can get things done, if only differently. And sometimes we share our stories and we can be an inspiration for other people. And, not in the way that other healthy people might say, oh, we're such an inspiration because we just exist and we continue to live. And, that's one thing that some people in the chronic illness world feel very uncomfortable with other people trying to make us an inspiration just by existing. But in sharing our story in the way that we want to share it, in the time and the opportunity that we want to do it, can be really inspiring for, it could be that we just speak in order to inspire other people, and really hope that that's what we can get out of it. So here's another powerful piece from another writer in the book. I have scars on my soul, scars on my body, scars on my brain, emotional scars from the cut that sliced my life into before my diagnosis and after, physical scars from where they made an incision on my side and pulled my skin and muscle wall apart to make a pocket to slip my device in and sewed it back up, and a scar on my chest where they fed the wire in to connect to the device so they could watch my every heartbeat and wait to jolt me when they stopped. Mental scars from going from promising young ballerina on a pre-professional path to disabled, disappointed, chronically ill, bulgingly bionic non-dancer with a dance degree. And I can hide every one of these scars if I choose to. I just have to shut my mouth, cover myself, and pretend. Yet I choose not to. I choose not to secret my scars by silencing myself. I choose not to conceal my scars by how I clothe myself. I choose not to flee to fantasy land of my own device where I still live with no device. Instead, I flaunt every scar I have. I've read this one so many times, and it gives me chills every time. And I think that it's just, it really shows how much feeling we can put into words, how much feeling we can get out of them. So the question is, how do you get started on sharing your story? And the reality is, you are all doing it already. You have grown up getting to know people, telling a little bit about yourself as they tell a little bit about themselves. That's how we make friends. That's how we, interact in general. And so it's really just a matter of expanding on that, on how you talk to each other and tell each other stories, and, what you choose to post on social media. You can look to organizations like NORD that offer opportunities where they are looking for patients to share their stories, for all of the various reasons we mentioned before. You can check out different media sites, whether it's news organizations, newspapers, television shows, any of those things you can find where they are looking for people to share their stories. You can start a blog or a podcast or a book. Any of those things can really help give you the opportunity to share your story, to share what of it you want, to share when you want, to share how you want, to share why you want. I think I missed a W in there, but you get the idea. Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
So much, Kerry. That was so awesome. Yeah, so we're gonna open the floor to any questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat, or if you
Okay,
want to
I
step to the
can't
mic.
hear you. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. If you wanna, I'm sorry, Kerry. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I think I had to stop sharing my screen in order to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me, Kerry?
I don't hear you.
All right, can you hear me, Kerry?
Can you hear us?
You can type it in the chat as well. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to step to the mic or type in the chat if you have any questions for Kerry. Okay, we're going to type the question in the chat. Carrie, if you please.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just making sure. Okay, great. So I see the question, could I share a little bit more about my disease? Yes, absolutely. So it's one of the reasons I didn't talk a little more about it earlier was really to kind of emphasize the point that in some ways it doesn't even matter what our particular condition is in the way that we can connect with each other, that so much of our experience is the same. But so I have a rare disease called sarcoidosis. It is an inflammatory condition that can affect any part of your body. So basically, what happens is the body builds up inflammation, kind of causes clusters of cells to form, clusters of inflammatory cells form, and they're called granulomas. And depending on where those granulomas form in your body, they can affect that organ or that system. And there's also just systemic inflammation as well. So for me, that is affecting my nervous system and my nervous system, my musculoskeletal system, so my joints and muscles, my skin, and my lungs. And then I also have systemic symptoms as well. And one of the things that it does in my nervous system is that it causes small fiber neuropathy, which is basically the small fibers are more what leads to your extremities, as opposed to, say, your brain and spine. But one of the things that also causes is a condition called dysautonomia, or it's basically dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. And so the autonomic nervous system is basically, think of it like automatic. So that is what causes, what functions, what creates the, manages the automatic functions of your body, things like heartbeat and blood pressure and digestion and breathing and all of that. So when all of that is affected, basically kind of everything can get all messy. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions in the audience? Oh, I see. Okay.
Oh, what has the response been to my blog post? So I will tell you, it's actually been a lot better than I expected. So I started it over 10 years ago. And initially, it wasn't entirely focused on my health. It was all kinds of self-esteem issues, I think, that I figured if I could help pick up other people, then I could help pick myself up also. And I've gotten a much better response to it than I expected. I've had people, comment and share and tell me how much it has made them realize that they could do things. It led to my column specifically because I've actually had the way I started the column was actually I was contacted by a human resources recruiter at Bio News, which is the parent company of Sarcoidosis News. And he wrote to me and said, I've been reading your blog and we think you're great and we would love to have you do a sarcoidosis column here. And so it's definitely been, I've had more response from people, patients and people who know patients, telling me how much that they relate to it, how it's made them feel better, which always makes me feel better. And yeah, so that's pretty much how it's been. It's been really great.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing today. I think we have one more question.
Sure. And I'm just going to put my screen back up because I had, in case anybody wanted to follow, stay in touch, anything like that. But I can actually hear you now, so you can ask that question.
Oh, great. Do you want to go up to the mic, Emily?
Hi, Kerry. I just was curious
Hi.
what your advice would be to patients who receive similar feedback from their doctors that their disease isn't real or they look healthy or something that is just not helpful, like losing weight.
Okay. So I heard this on the radio back in 2008. It was a life-changing moment for me. There was somebody giving advice on the radio in between songs on my way home from work. And he was basically, what he was saying is that what people don't realize is that doctors work for you. I think a lot of us kind of grow up with this idea that, we're here. If we have a problem, we go to the doctor, we do what they say, and that's all there is to it. And what they said on the radio that day was, that we need to remember that doctors work for us and that we have the ability, the opportunity, the even obligation to fire them if they are not doing their job. So that was just kind of mind-blowing for me. And it's only been reinforced since then, is the idea that you do not have to stick with a doctor who doesn't stick with you. The biggest thing that I ever say is trust your gut, trust your instincts. If you feel that something is wrong, there's something wrong, and there's something that needs to be seen and addressed. And if a doctor that you go to is not willing to see you, is not willing to, and I don't mean not willing to see you as in not make an appointment, I mean not willing to really see who you are and what you're saying and what is concerning for you, then you get another doctor. And I will be completely honest, that could be really, really frustrating. I think it took until it was several years and maybe my 8th or 9th rheumatologist. Well, I'm on my 9th rheumatologist now, and I absolutely love her. But it took probably 5 or 6 until I got a response that I needed. And so it can be really frustrating. And it's really easy for us to kind of give up at that point and just think we have to just deal with whatever it is. And sometimes it can even make us almost question ourselves. You hear from a professional so many times that there's nothing wrong with you. You start to kind of believe that there's nothing wrong with you, and it must be just in your head. But I would say the most important thing is stick with your gut. If you feel something is wrong, whether it's with your body or with the doctor that you're going to see, you can find somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, and there will be someone who believes you. And it could be a matter of, searching in, posing a question in a Facebook group. Hey, does anybody in the Southern California area have an issue with this? You have a good doctor to recommend. Or you could contact NORD and say, hey, do you have a good doctor in my area you could recommend? And find the one that will listen to you, because they're out there and you deserve that.
All right, Kerry, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. Really appreciate you having on today. So if you all give Kerry a big round of applause, please.
All right. Thank you all so much for having me. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Really appreciate it. Hope you have an awesome day too.